How about a lot of them?
Okay, good evening, everyone. This is a meeting of the Board of Education in public for the purpose of conducting school district business and not to be considered a public community meeting. There is time for public participation during the meeting as indicated on the agenda. Upon request to the superintendent, the district shall make reasonable accommodation for a person with disabilities to be able to participate in this meeting. And just as a reminder, we'd like to make sure that everyone please silences their phone before we start officially. So we'll start with a call to with a roll call.
Mr. Albright.
Here.
Mr. Arnold. Mrs. Bruderly. Here. Mrs. Greatorex.
Here.
Ms. Kangas. Here. Mr. Lundy.
Here.
Mrs. O'Hara. Here. Mr. Naughton.
Here.
Mr. Patel.
Here.
Moving on to our next order of business, which is the approval of the meeting minutes. Your packet includes the meeting minutes from March 21st, 2022.
I move that the Board of Education approves the minutes from March 21st as presented.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes from 3/21/2022 as presented. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, we'll put it to a vote. All those in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. They have been approved. Next is the approval of the agenda. Board policy provides the superintendent of schools shall prepare an agenda for all board meetings as directed by the president of the Board of Education.
That the Board of Education approve the agenda as presented.
I'll second. It's been moved and seconded to approve the agenda as presented. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, I'll put it to a vote to approve the agenda. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Say no. It's been approved. We'll move on to the school presentations. First, Dr. Tunis will share a brief presentation on potential recreation village to fund senior activities and youth and adult recreation. There's time on the discussion agenda for the board to ask questions. And this item will also be a discussion item on April 25th, 2022 meeting.
So, I didn't know if we wanted to let the dread bots go first, because I can see they're.
I can totally-
I don't think I should do that.
I agree with that, but
I can see they're ready to go.
okay, well, I accept that amendment. So yeah, we'll let the Dreadbots, members of the Robotics Club, will do a brief presentation for the board.
So this is the middle school, they're actually called Rumble Penguins. So, the middle school robotics team is first, which has different grade levels for the competition. The one we're in is actually called the First Tech Challenge at FTC. This is about half of our team. I'll let them introduce themselves and present the rest of it.
Hi.
Which allows to move back and forth, which is called streaming.
So you can, so move it, so it's not. Is that okay?
For the friends for lunch and this is on the desk. easily move to the side. And then move up.
Yes, so there's the lip, which you can see up front. It's like the tall tower thing. It's two-stage lip, and it has this arm that flips out, and it allows us to drop blocks onto each of the forms of the goal.
So I worked on the programming, but another thing we have is what we call the duck spin. It's that little wheel you see up there. So it spins this carousel that will have a rubber duck on it, and your goal is to spin it off the carousel. So we used an FTC software to program the robot. It's block coding, so it's a bit simpler. And it's mostly just trial and error, really.
I also worked on the programming side, and like you said, a lot of it was trial and error. A lot of things that we had to learn about the robot, about coding, and all those different things. It was a new experience for all of us. So this is a board that we made. We designed this for like there's this competition that we go to. We designed this for the competition, and this describes what we do. It has our favorite parts of robotics, and also some little descriptions that somebody put up. It's pretty interesting.
What language are you using for the coding?
It is like a kind of, it's programming language. Okay.
Similar.
I think it's the block version of Java. Yeah, it's similar to Scratch, but the robot also offers Java. If you want to use Java, you need to know what each of the things that go to each folder, like you need to know how to run those, start the program, and it's all very specific. So since we didn't really have any prior knowledge, Java we used the most.
How many hours did it take you guys to do this?
It took a couple of months, but we had multiple practices for a week. And yeah, 2 hours for 2 hours. And then in the last couple of weeks, we started doing like 3-hour sessions.
Who designs and builds the robot?
Kind of the whole, so we kind of separated into the build team and the drive, well, not really the drive, the build team and the programming team. So most of the time with the build team, some people were in between both. So about half of us were the build team, and they totally designed the robot. No instruction manuals. They had to trial and error to figure out what works for them.
That's actually this house.
Oh.
Like on the ground?
We can pick up cubes. And it's been a long time since we've done this. That is our robot.
Are you able to take one of these like field trips, like Amazon fulfillment centers or any manufacturing centers, which are pretty much doing like that, picking on a larger scale, obviously, but it's.
Did not do that. We did not go on a tour anywhere else. The rules come out in the middle of September and they have 2-3 months to get this built. So it's pretty much full-time design and build. They did get a tour of the high school robotics, see what they've built. So that's about the only tour.
When was the competition?
Beginning of December.
I'm just amazed. I think this is really cool. You guys did such a good job. I know it's hard to like come up and tell us all about it. So I applaud you first for coming in and showing us your amazing piece of art and robotics. It's very cool. And I'm so excited that you guys came in. You guys are our first visitors for a very long time. So, well, we did have our orchestra as well. But this was very cool. And I thank you so much for coming in and telling us all about it. Do you guys have any other questions?
They work right out of down the hall.
Yep. We've got a room just down here that donate or dedicated to us, so we can leave all our stuff there.
That's great.
Makes life a lot easier for us. We do appreciate that.
So will you all go on to the high school trip class? No pressure. Awesome. And thank you for the parent volunteers. I know you put in a lot of time
worth it.
For sure. Oh, yeah.
I love it.
That's great.
That's awesome. Thank you so much.
I wanted to see the ducky thing.
Yeah, I kind of want to see the duck.
Sorry.
This.
Oh.
Spinning the duck off.
Can you move the whole thing?
Okay, so the penguin's just kind of like a team element, just kind of replaces the duck. Just think you give it more points in competition if you use it instead. Normally there'd be a wall behind the duck, but couldn't take all that.
That's why there's a wall.
Cool. That's very cool.
I think it's too simple.
Do you know how did rebel penguins get?
We're brainstorming ideas on the whiteboard and somehow penguins came up.
I mean, yes. That's true.
I love the logo.
Yeah. Thank you for coming. Thank you so much for coming.
See what you come up with in high school.
Right now, you're on.
All right. Wanted to take a few minutes and talk about a recreation village, presentation, discussion, give some background on kind of what's talked about behind throughout the community, and then I'd like to bring to the board for actual discussion over the next couple of meetings. So what is a recreation village? So the Recreation Authority Act of 321 of 2000. It allows for the establishment of what's called a recreation authority, which can be set up around a municipality like a city or a township, a school district, or a combination of two or more municipalities or school districts. So you can set it up around boundaries. This is not that drastically different than how the library is set up. It's set up around the Dexter Community School boundaries. So what it allows is that the school district, municipality, or combination of two or more can bring a proposal to voters for not more than 1 mil for a period of 20 years on all the taxable property within that jurisdiction. And the recreation village is allowed to be used in the case of a school district to pay for community recreation, construction, and maintenance of recreation facilities, and then programming for any district resident. So currently throughout the state, this is just a handful of districts and municipalities and entities that have a recreation village. So Saline Area Schools has the CARES village, which funds senior citizens and community recreation in the rec center. Lincoln Consolidated Schools has a recreation village. Whitmore Lake has a recreation village. That's just in our county. Statewide, a handful of examples. So East Grand Rapids Public Schools has a recreation village. Traverse City has a recreation authority, which is the recreation department for the entire area. Charlevoix has something similar. Oakland County Parks have a recreation village to fund parks throughout the county. And there are a series of municipalities and school districts over the last 20 years that have put together a recreation authority and funded through a village. So currently in Dexter, here's how we fund the activities that a recreation village would fund. So the Dexter Senior Center historically has been for the last 25 years at minimum at Copeland. And the way the Dexter Senior Center operates is their actual revenue they generally have to fundraise or get donations, other than a handful of dollars. So about 20%, which might be pretty generous, of what they get from the city of Dexter. I don't know if SIO pays much or not. The city rented space to pay. There's a bunch of different ways that they receive some funding. The rest of it is grants and donations. So it's pretty unstable funding to be able to operate senior activities. So when we look at around the neighboring communities like Chelsea and Saline, the Dexter Senior Center operates on less than a third of what Chelsea seniors operate on and what Saline operates on. So every year they're trying to figure out how they're going to run activities, because activities do cost money to be able to run the activities. We historically, when we were in Copeland, we leased that space to them for $1. And we worked out when we sold the building to the Encore that they would have a period of time when they would have a similar lease agreement. And then we would have to find a solution. Well, that time is now. And we promised the senior center we would help them find a solution. So right now, the senior center has no reliable funding other than about 20% of their funds from different agencies, and then they have to fundraise. Community ed. So we operate community education, which is really the recreation department for our 84 square mile district. And it's all fee-based. So we end up covering any overhead costs, any materials, all based on user fees. And that does limit our ability to offer opportunities. And then it makes us put into these, we work with community groups, like we'll work with the Little League and DCAC and community band, community orchestra. We work with all the community groups to kind of shuffle through spaces and make it work. And everything is fee-based. And anybody that's ever done a community ed program or been in one of those organizations, you know, it's a constant scramble to figure it out. And we're making all the different groups kind of fit into our spaces where we can. And it works pretty well, but the limitations are you can't charge too much, but you have to charge enough to try to break even. And that's always, and what happens with that is sometimes when you want to start a new program, if you're only going to get a handful of people, you can't run it because you can't afford the time of people to run it, or it's all volunteer based to figure out how to run things. So that's how we run community ed. And we run like Saturday morning basketball leagues. We run, we work with they're doing flag football. We have field hockey, volleyball. Then we have adult leagues. There's an adult men's basketball league that usually plays out of the creek one day a week. There are, we do yoga, we do different activities mixed throughout the district through community ed. But when we look at, so all of our facilities, the CPA, the pools, both pools, the high school and the Wiley pool, all of our fields, our playgrounds, we operate on our per pupil foundation allowance that we get for K-12 education. The way schools are funded is the state sets our amount, and they fund us based on that we would have 180 days of school minimum and at least 1,098 instructional hours. We have to then, the board has to every year work through the budget, figure out how we're going to fund it, and make sure that our fields are still operating. We still run athletic programs, we still run our arts programs, we pay the electricity, we pay the utilities. So we do everything else through our normal funding mechanism. In a good year, community ed is close to break even. In most years in the last decade or so, we're supplementing it a significant amount just to make, because it's important. And we moved through different iterations. Like we had at one point, we had preschool in community ed, we taken it, separated it. We had the pool cost and things we tried to figure out what the real pool costs are and try to work that in and out. But we're always juggling, trying to make sure that community ed can operate and provide to our community all the different offerings. So why the conversation of a recreation village? Throughout the community, there's been interest in, first, how to help the seniors. So there is no dedicated funding for seniors in Dexter. And these are the same citizens of our community that built the community. And as a school district, we worked with the senior center to give them space. We supported their technology. We took care of the spaces. And we've been really good about it. When we sold Copeland, we told them at the time, we will not leave you hanging. We will help you. And that was supposed to end like 2023-ish, I think, right around there. So it's coming up. So we're in that window that we need to figure out how to help our seniors. And as an entity, we are the only entity in the community that could do it. Because it's not, the city of Dexter is 2 square miles. We go through 8 other municipalities, but not the entire municipality, just fractions. So as an entity, when you look at the Dexter Community Schools, we are the community, our 84 square miles that goes through each of the townships and throughout the city. So our seniors in our community that they live in our district, they identify as their Dexter resident. So when we look, we've gone several years of having different entities in the community conducting surveys, focus groups, and studies. So with the Dexter Community Fund, prior to the pandemic, it's these large focus groups with members of the entire Dexter community, and asked what we needed, what the community desired that they could help figure out how to make happen or fund. And some of the areas that rose up were how to help seniors to get stable funding, how to have some form of community center, and how do we support recreation that's not just fee-based. We had the Dexter Senior Center received a grant. They've been conducting some studies and focus groups, same findings. Support seniors, some kind of community center. We've done several different iterations, and the most recent one was support seniors, figure out how to get some kind of community center, figure out how to support recreation programs. And they've all had overwhelming community interest in supporting our seniors, community activities, activities for kids, and a need for some sort of community center that is a meeting place. Right now, the school serve that, the wellness center does kind of, it's a cost thing, trying to figure out where it all fits. So community values, when you look, our community is really it's connected through the school district. So if you go to Webster Township, or you go to Dexter Township, or you go to Scioto, et cetera, you're still saying you're in Dexter. And it's around our school district boundaries. So regardless of what township or city our community members reside, they always say that they live in Dexter. And the members of our community are connected through geography, but also through activities within the community. So if you go to Dairy Queen after the Little League games finish, it's packed. You go there after there's youth soccer or a field hockey tournament going on, it's packed. You go after band or orchestra, choir performances. You could see the community connections downtown. And the people that are in town don't live in the city per se, but that's our connection. So our students are connected, and the quality of life throughout our community is protected through our collective commitment. And the collective commitment's always been to the schools. The schools define the community. It's a very unique setup to be all on one campus and not be spread out through a community, and to have the number of students we have in that campus, but it is central. And it pulls the community together. And they're connected, they're protected through this collective commitment to each other. I mean, you think back to the days of the tornado and then how during the pandemic people came together. It's a really tight community. Our approach as a school district has always been to listen to the community. We may not always agree up front, but we always come up with solutions that in the end, everybody can fall behind. And that's that constant respect of listening and working through the process and trying to navigate of, okay, what is best for our kids, what's best for our community, and how are we going to get to the right solution? So reasons to consider talking about doing a rec millage or proposing one to the community is our seniors who built this community, we have some obligation to help support seniors. And they continue to support our kids through their tax dollars because we update buildings and update facilities. Every year, they're scrambling to fundraise just to operate programs, basic programming for our seniors. So historically, we gave them space at Copeland. And we promised at that time when we sold Copeland, we would do something to help them out, to find space. We can find them space within somewhere in the district, but they still need operating. And it shouldn't be based on if they can get $3,000 from one of the townships, and they get $2,000 from another municipality, and try to piece it together little by little to just try to run basic programming. So if we can provide as a district a way to give them space and allow them to have stable, sustainable funding so that they can create programming to support healthy and fulfilling aging throughout our community. It's really not necessarily in every community a school district's role, but we're a community school district. We're not Dexter Public Schools, we're Dexter Community Schools. We operate as a community. We have accessibility for the community that we could increase. So currently, our recreation department is community ed, and it's 100% fee-based. And that limits who can participate and what we can offer. We have to make sure that the pricing is at the right rate that we can actually offer in our buildings, that we don't outprice, but that also means we get close to not covering our costs to be able to really expand. And when you look at with kids, so a child's education, we all know that education for kids isn't just when they sit in the classroom. It's the experience that they get in the combination of what they do with their families, what they do within their community, and what they do within their classroom. And as a community school district, we are uniquely positioned to try to expand those opportunities. So what a recreation millage would look like to our voters is that the board could place a proposal on the ballot for no more than 1 mil for no more than 20 years. 1 mil would generate about $1.4 million in the first year. And then it would have slight increases as property values go up, but be subject to the headline. So there's some caps and some rollbacks and things like that. The board would have to approve a resolution at least 60 days prior to an election. So May is next month. So May is not an option. August, November, etc. are options. So what could be funded with the recreation launch? Give it examples. We could set up and dedicate stable funding for the seniors, for senior activities, and set up a location in one of our facilities throughout the district. Approximately, say, $300,000 a year, which would be 3 or 4 times what they have to operate now.
Make a quick clarification for folks. It says DCS fund, but the reality is that the school district can make this happen, but it's not a school function per se. We're a fiscal agent, and there would actually be a separate advisory committee that oversees it. So this is not a school program, but it's something that can only happen with the school initiating.
The board would ultimately oversee the funds. The board's historically committed to following what was promised in votes. And we'd have to set up some kind of advisory to make sure that every year it's kind of analyzed and looked through and figure out how to separate it out. Other things we could do is eliminate participation fees. We can't take the recreation dollars, village dollars, and directly pay it towards athletics, but we could cover costs that are allowable that would replace the $200,000 or so that we bring in participation fees for athletics. So if we have to maintain the facilities, we have to cut the grass, we have to run utilities, things, and maintenance of those. We could figure out how to offset the cost.
Not operating, so not coaching.
We could not be for the coaches of our high school or middle school athletic. We could for a youth program. So then supporting youth and adult enrichment. So if anyone that's ever lived in another community that had a recreation department, sometimes they can offer things we struggle to offer because we have to do a fee based. There's usually some kind of organizational cost to make it work. So if you look at like fine arts, art, music, drama, we have a beautiful facility and we manage it as best we can and we take care of it really well. But we can't always expand our arts programs unless an outside group wants to try to do it. And sometimes it's just not, when it's a fee-based system, there's not enough staff to be able to help manage all the different players that are trying to get into spaces. So it's a juggle all the time. But we could really expand arts camps and arts opportunities, music, drama opportunities throughout the community. We could expand our enrichment for youth and adults. So if you look, there's no reason we couldn't run softball leagues, kickball leagues, pickleball leagues, tennis leagues. The only thing that holds us back right now is why would someone in the community, when we have all these tennis courts, pay money for us to oversee a tennis league? When you just show up and play. But there are people that would like to learn, but we don't have the structures built to be able to offer. If we do with youth, we ran last summer, we ran all of those camps that kids could participate in. This summer, we're doing the same thing. List will come out in a couple of weeks. We could do that every year and just make it part of how we operate and allow our kids to try things and not have to pay hundreds of dollars to try. Other things we could do is we could set aside dollars to fund a future community center of some sort. It could be operational dollars, or it could be operation and construction dollars, however we want to utilize it. And ideally, that facility would be set up in a way that our community can access it during the day and in the evening. One of the things we have now is we'll have like a high school gym, it's a great walking track. But we can't have community members show up at 2 o'clock on a Tuesday to walk in when we're running classes. But we're running a varsity game in there. And we do have people come in and walk during the game, but we could set up some opportunities for some kind of indoor community center where our and operate it, where we're not pulling out of our general operations that we're supposed to, that we're using those hours to teach kids in our 180 days, and operate a true community center.
But this wouldn't fund the cost of construction.
It could, because it's 20 years. So there's some opportunities if it were taken in, and this is just one option, I'm just putting examples to kind of think through so you know what it would apply to. But a municipality or a recreation authority could take those dollars and build with them. You could either save up the dollars until you have enough, or you could sell bonds because you have guaranteed revenue for the next 20 years that you can pay off the bonds with for a specific purpose. So there's options.
Well, the other option that you mentioned anyway, that there's some private sector partnerships, because we certainly have been led to believe that there are a number of different groups that would be willing to add to what we can do to provide a measured facility overall, both in terms of seniors and in terms of facility. Field house, for lack of a better thing.
Yeah, I mean, one of the trends in education is in communities is building indoor space, especially in Michigan, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and et cetera, where you look, our spaces can't be used for 5 months of the year. Some of our facilities outside. So trying to build some covered spaces that are multifunctional. And we watch parents, and you might have probably have all done this, driving all over the place to get indoor space. But community members, like in the winter, people used to walk at the mall. I don't know if most people do. So you have to find places when it's 10 degrees to go. And we could create a space that could be utilized that way. I've seen models. There's a great one up in Upton Pigeon Lake. Yeah, Laker Schools, up in the Little Dinky District. They have an entire, it's like the mini legacy center. It's open to the community. They fob in and out all day. And they're in there, they can pickleball, they can basketball, they can play tennis, there's some turf-like surface, there's a walking path, a walking track, there's lots of options. There's no reason we couldn't create something, but you need a mechanism to be able to run it. And building is, if you have a combination of private and public funds, you can do a lot, but you have to figure out how to operate too. So the concept of a recreation village would allow us to get stable funding for seniors and build a formal recreation department that's not totally fee-based. That could support adults, kids, everybody in the community. So what I wanted to do is I needed to give the presentation, and we set it up on the agenda for discussion so we can really have the discussion. And with no intention of action at the next meeting, is discussion. And we figure out a discussion again or not.
There is a cutoff date for making a decision in order to have the August election.
Yeah, the August deadline is early May. The November one's a little later, so it's 60 days.
The August has particular attraction for a couple of reasons, including that if it's after August, why you don't get funding for an additional year. Especially in terms of building up reserves to do some of the things that we'd like to do. It'd be really nice to collect earlier before some of the operations really come up to speed.
So for example, if we were, if we went in August, taxes could begin to be collected in January, which allows in January 23 to have revenue coming in, which could be used to help create the space for the senior center. Because right now, we have classrooms. They don't have bathrooms that are appropriate. I mean, this building is one of the logical places to start with, but it was a K2 building most recently. So it's got little toilets, and it's got pretty
Not the
narrow
right spot.
doorways. What's that?
They're not in the right spot.
Yeah, and
Gotta go outside, get to them from where their space would be.
yeah, we'd have to do some work in here, and it'll cost money to build it, to make it appropriate use for a senior center. If we went with another option for senior center, we need time and it takes money. And it's not something that we could say that we would just take out of K-12 dollars. But it's, as a community school district, we're the only entity in this community that could do something like this.
Do something like this, and like case the Dexter City, like some support already. And I know, like,
Don't come.
well, it's on kind of, I don't want,
So, yeah, let's,
I also don't want it to come what we,
let's wait to, I think that's a great
Oh,
question,
yeah,
but
okay,
let's
well,
wait for the discussion.
We'll be there really quick.
All right, so, we're up to. So during public comments, each speaker is allotted a maximum of 5 minutes for a total of 30 minutes unless otherwise notified. Each speaker will be asked to announce his or their name and district of residence and indicate if he, they represent any organization or agency. No person may speak more than once on the same subject during a single meeting. Those wishing to receive a personal response from the board or superintendent must complete a public comment form available at the meeting entrance and on our website. In addition, as presiding officer, I would like to remind everyone that public comments should pertain to Dexter Community School District matters and concerns related to the operation of schools or matters within the authority of the board. Those who wish to speak shall direct all comments to the board and not to staff or other participants. Also, speakers addressing the board shall take into consideration rules of common courtesy. Speakers who make attacks of a personal nature and or who do not abide by the rules of common courtesy will be reminded of such rules by the board president or presiding officer. Such individuals may be asked to leave the meeting if their behavior is disruptive or interferes with the orderly progress of the meeting. Also, please understand that the board members do not respond to public comments, but we do listen very carefully and we will follow up as appropriate. If there is an immediate need for clarification, we will do so after the speakers have allotted time. So I will open it up to public participation. If anybody would like to. Does this go to you? Yeah. Switch.
Okay, thanks. I have a browse up now, but thank you.
Well, I want to make sure that we.
Okay, so my name is Carissa Keller. I am a parent in the community. First of all, I want to say kudos to the robotics team. That was really cool. My son used to be on the middle school robotics team, and then my other son was on the dread box up until, the dreaded COVID. So that was really cool to see that. Okay, so I would like to bring up the topic of the school calendar and specifically talk about a certain Friday, and I'll call it Good Friday. Historically, at least since 2010, per the district's old calendars that I found on the district's website this morning, Good Friday was either a standalone no school day or attached to spring break somehow. I took screenshots of it and I was going to make copies, but I'm like, that's just too much paper. It's still on the website. You can go look it up yourself if you want. But I do have a summary of the data from 2010 to 2019. Good Friday occurred 2 times during scheduled spring break week. There were 2 times when spring break started on Good Friday, so that Friday, and then Spring break came the following week, meaning students had 6 consecutive days off. 6 times in that time frame, Good Friday was scheduled as a standalone, no school day, meaning it was either before or after actual spring break week. Here's what I know about the last 3 years. 2020, let's just go ahead and forget about that one. But truly, it wasn't on the calendar that I could find. In 2021, Good Friday was during spring break. This year, 2022, Good Friday, nothing, regular school day. However, the following Friday, 1 week later, on April 22nd, there is a random no school day. Exactly 1 week after Good Friday. So I look at this as a solid example of either inconsistency due to poor planning or an attack on Christianity. It's got to be one or the other. And if this is poor planning, own it and fix it for next year's school calendar. There are many parents who are taken by surprise because historically there was consistency on Good Friday being a no school day. Overall consistency since 2010 at the very least. Last evening, there was an exchange of some thoughts on social media about this, and a few community members suggested that, well, maybe there's a trade-off between having Martin Luther King Jr. Day off and Good Friday. But again, I was busy this morning and looked back at the calendars, and I can confirm that Martin Luther King Day has been considered a no school day every year, at least from 2010 to current 2022. So a trade-off situation isn't even possible. Something has changed here. Something has fundamentally changed here in Dexter. We are surrounded by multiple school districts in Washtenaw County that have Good Friday off as a standalone holiday this year. IPSI schools have a half-day early release, and all other Washtenaw County schools are closed for the day, but Dexter Community Schools are open. Historically, we too have Good Friday off. And you know what? In my search this morning, I even found in the years 2010, 2013, 2016, and 2017, the actual verbiage of Good Friday, no school. It was used on the official school calendar. I am not suggesting you use that verbiage moving forward. I'm just restating the language used on previous calendars. I do have a little copy of that if you want it.
Just let you know, you have 1 minute, 30 seconds.
Okay, well, thanks for, pointing out the inconsistency of this year's calendar when compared to other years is not out of line. And for what it's worth, other community members also feel attacked and are frustrated. Whoever has a final say in the 22-23 calendar dates, I have an ask. I ask if there is a random no school day to be scheduled in the springtime to please consider putting it back on Good Friday, like it's been done for several years. I ask that consistency be taken into consideration, the same spirit of consistency as is used for scheduling the no school day on the Friday every year after Thanksgiving. I'm not asking for anything new here. At the end of the day, this is about consistency and being inclusive of everybody. Look around at neighboring school districts in the county. This is not an unreasonable request. So thank you for potentially considering other perspectives.
Anyone else who would like to comment?
Rhonda Hayes, Dexter here. My son is not going to school on Friday because we do church services every year. And I'm not sure you guys realize it, but our faith leaders at Dexter, we have very strong faith leaders. We have very strong and active churches. And I know even one of you attends my church. So I just feel this was really wrong move, very wrong.
Anyone else? We will move on to next item on the agenda, which is administrative and board updates.
A couple quick things. We have a series of construction projects that'll be most likely at the next board meeting for approvals, which are finalization of pavement and asphalt bids and projects. We have a large mechanical bid. We bid out for the mechanical equipment, and now we have the trades component coming in. And then for a toilet building at Twin Turf Fields. So that bid is due prior to the next meeting. State testing starts tomorrow, so high school testing, grade testing. There is, the Department of Ed is very clear according to federal law, there is no opting out. Students in school, we have to by law give them the test. We are coming up sometime in either the next board meeting in April or in early May. We'll have a summer math and reading program proposal and request for funding. We were able to finally hire a district-wide social worker. We've been trying since, well, and she started last week. So, clarification on what holidays by law we cannot have school. And by law, we cannot have school on July 4th, Michigan law, Labor Day. We cannot have school on Thanksgiving or the Friday after Thanksgiving by law. We cannot have school on Christmas, New Year's Day, or Memorial Day. So the Good Friday change, the spring break is dictated by the county calendar, which is, it's scheduled for 5 years in advance. So spring break is always the last week of full week of March. According to the county calendar, it was the first full week of April, and that changed around 2017-ish because of state testing for high school, because it was hitting according to the ACT test at the time. We would go on spring break if we went that week, and then the kids would come back Monday, and then Tuesday they had to take the ACT. So it was rolled back to the last week of March. Sometimes that hits around Easter and Good Friday, sometimes it does not. But it is consistent. That's been in the law for at least 20 years. And then the Good Friday holiday used to be in collective bargaining agreements. And it was in several of our union agreements. And it was negotiated and changed to Martin Luther King Day a couple years back. Clarification.
Thank you. Moving on to board president update. I don't have anything to update. So we'll go on to the gentleman, student representatives.
First week back after spring break, I don't have any.
Yes, other than what Tim said, standardized testing, high school is especially big year, juniors, always big year. We have 3 tests this week. Everyone else, PSAT, SAT for juniors in high school. And then first week back from break, other than spring sports kind of going up in full speed, not a lot going on. Thank you.
Election.
In the high school, there was NHS elections for next year.
Yeah,
Then, I am.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Yeah, on the spot.
I did, I'm sorry.
Well, your son, Lucas Grader is 12th grade member at large as well.
Yes, but he's not here, so we'll just move on to consent items. We have personnel resignations. Our packet includes 2 letters of resignation, one from DHS math teacher Anna Patel, effective immediately, and one from DHS Spanish teacher Elizabeth Kerr, effective May 12. And we also have personnel requests for leave, 2 requests for extensions of leave of absence for the 2022-2023 school year from Jessica Elkins and Rebecca Lay. Board of Education approved the consent items.
I'll second.
It has been moved and seconded to approve the consent items in bulk. Is there any discussion?
I just have a question on the leave. Is there a limit? I'm assuming that the tenure then is maintained and the ability to draw, etc. Is there any limit by statute on how long a person can take a leave?
Once someone earns tenure in a district, they retain tenure forever in the district. On leaves, we have in the contracts, we have a number of days that are permitted per year. And we have the leeway to be able to extend an additional leave if needed. So for example, one of the positions is a really hard to fill position. So that we always have an opening every year for that certification. And so we're hopeful that the person will go after gets a little older from that. And then, just a great teacher.
No, I'm not
There's a
questioning.
lot of.
I'm fine. I was just wondering if there's any rules about it. Thank you.
Is there any more discussion? All those in favor of approving the consent items in bulk, say aye.
Aye.
Any against, say nay. The consent items have been passed in bulk. Moving on to action items, of which we have none. So we'll move on to discussion items, which is the potential recreation village discussion that we've got from the school presentation.
I have one question before we get into that about the testing. If a student is not in school for one of the tests, would they be required to make up the test?
We are required by law to test a minimum of 95% of our students in our total student population and 95% minimum of any subgroup. For example, if a student is headlining in special ed, we only have 30 students in that grade level. A couple students would put us under the 95%. We're in violation of federal law. You can't state. We get into economically disadvantaged or subgroups that have, they are African American students. One or two students put us under the 95%. So it's student. We have to do everything we can to get students to make the best of their. And they're not in the ability to get there in 95%. And Dr. Rice, the state superintendent, said there's no option.
Dan, did you want to start off the discussion?
Yeah, I guess. I like the idea. Only concern I have is that major concern is I think I kind of hit on it, but last week, so Webster Township put out a survey. Well, this Webster might see a survey about somewhere, not mostly for senior citizens and other activities like for Boy Scouts, but to use with their basically Webster, their space out there, right? I'm sure the other townships probably do the same thing. Where, no, only Webster.
That's something new, they got special grant.
Right, they got funding for it, but what I'd like to see is possible, can we, we talk to them and see what they're doing, and maybe to have their funds or something, or so we don't duplicate stuff.
Yeah, they were given a small grant, I believe, from the Ann Arbor Community Foundation, maybe, to do a survey and focus groups. The Dexter Senior Center was given a similar grant. They ran their focus groups already from their grant. It's timing, Judy, that they did that right around the same time, but they both received the grant because they're both finding there's a need.
Right.
And the real need is not just space, it's sustainable funding for program. That's really the biggest challenge, because if we look like currently the way seniors are funded, there's some money for Meals on Wheels that comes in through federal grants. For years, we provided Meals on Wheels food and worked with them on food. There's some money that comes in from a handful of municipalities, which equates to, I think, $13,000 total out of all 9 municipalities in our district. So at $13,000, doesn't even pay electric, water bills that are decent size. So to run programming, they're in a constant scramble for donations and funding.
The other things that, well, concern with it, but
We're aware of that in the meetings that have been going on. All they've got is money to do a survey type thing. They don't have any money or ability to put on a program like we would be able to do with the rec village. And I think that we would end up certainly having conversations to make sure that we knew what each other is thinking about doing, but they would only do a small segment of the total school district. And so we need to do our thing, work with them to coordinate wherever it's appropriate.
The other thing is like the overhead. Stuff like this eventually requires staffing. You know, you can really pull finance to themselves. Would the staffing for this be paid out of the village if staffing was required?
Yeah, generally, I mean, to run programming, you're paid for people.
Right.
That's the big cost. The materials aren't, they're one-time costs usually, or there's some disposable consumables, but when you look at recreation, for the most part, you can reuse materials. So it's people that run the program, it's people who, if you're running a Zumba class or a yoga class, you need an instructor. If you're organizing a league, you need someone to organize the league, you gotta pay for officials of some sort. There are potentially some utility costs, but if you look at, like, in larger recreation programs in municipalities, you would see fields with lights or courts with lights that are running. So you have electrical costs, you have lights, you have installation of lights. You would have registration, there's probably some software costs for registration to be able to keep it straight. There's, you look at youth leagues, you're gonna have t-shirts. We probably could get the t-shirts away for free. We might have to charge maybe $5 or $7 for a t-shirt for a kid to be in something. So make a t-shirt. But there'd be costs for the people that run the program. So if you look at some of our programming, like that Saturday basketball league, any of your kids have ever played boys or girls in the basketball league, that's actually a bigger undertaking than anybody would imagine. It's you'll have 8 to 10 teams for rates. So you're running all day, 2 locations. It's probably $40,000 or $50,000 a year just to run that, plus the t-shirts. And then you look at Little League. Little League probably costs $100,000 plus a year to operate, I'm guessing. DCAC's got to be 70 to 100,000 to run every year. I mean, it's usually people and then some cost of materials, but we could help work with our community groups and help get access for kids.
We could be more efficient in scheduling. We could provide a lot more opportunities by maybe having some full-time staff instead of taking bits and pieces of folks.
We do.
Interested in trying to help.
Like the CPA, historically, we run with a part-time person. Aquatics director, we have like a 3-hour-a-day aquatics director that doubles as a lifeguard, that doubles as whatever else we need at any given time. We piece it together the best we can to run everything. This would give us an opportunity to build actual sustainable funding structures that isn't just fee-based, but based on who signed up. I mean, I look at like the daddy-daughter dates this week. Okay, in a couple weeks. That takes weeks and weeks and weeks to put together, but it's really important for kids and parents. It's really important. And we do all of these activities, but we do it all fee-based to make sure that we can get enough kids and we can run it and not lose money. We never make money. And it's always how close can we get to negative something? Not, but as close to 0 as possible.
My biggest concern is that it doesn't become one of these things that I like it, walking around, but there's no one thing that starts to take on a sort of soup. Something I like its own anyways, where it distracts from. I know that's why you have a separate thing, separate budget, but distraction from day-to-day school, including. I remember a couple of years ago, when I first moved here, that we should about scheduling. We got twin turfs now, so it's not really an issue, but where there were some people that were upset over women's sports being bumped for community sports. So, you know, it's nice to make sure wherever the policies are set up for this is that the school activities will always be fundamentally the priority first.
And our way our policy works, it's school activities first. They're directly related to the academics. So generally band, orchestra, choir are tied directly to a class. Then it goes to our millage would actually be part of that community education. Then it moves to outside groups that are affiliated in some way with the school district, so literally ECAC and all the different youth clubs that are in the district. And then it goes to rentals. And what happened before we restructured our athletics is we had club sports, and we were self-funded, and we had school supported, and we cleaned all that up. But this would allow us to really run, first it would fund seniors, and then it would fund our recreation activities for the entire community, kids and adults.
And if you moved away from like, which I kind of like the idea, not making kids pay for like a high school sport, but there's still some sports out there like clubs that are traditional sport, but they're expensive, like hockey, you know, and I know it's expensive, but it's, you know, I would say that's got to be taken into consideration too, because if you're, I don't play hockey, you know, kids are play hockey, but if you're a high school hockey player, or whatever, when they start playing, it's, I still want to see other people left out just because of costs here.
Yeah, hockey's a challenge, equestrian's a challenge, just for cost. Hockey probably, we have never really 65,000 pairs of money for one team, ice time. And equestrian, I don't think one-on-one person.
There's been insurance issues beyond that.
Okay.
Basically, we would, if this were to go through, it would enhance our pre-K 12 program by supporting things more fully and expanding them over what we're able to do now. So that's a significant advantage. If we can get the field house as a part of this, that really expands the opportunities for the community to use facilities that right now are blocked during the day. Overall, there should be more opportunities for everyone.
And what happens, so I use youth sports as an example. What happens in youth sports before the kids get to the middle school teams or the high school teams is it's whatever parent can figure out how to navigate the system and how much you're willing to pay to get on the team. That shouldn't happen to every kid. That we get kids that would love to play a sport, but they don't have anywhere to play. And they're not going to pay $2,000 to drive up to Brighton and play at the Legacy Center. They're not going to be able to pay the cost and navigate how you get access to a lot of these sports, but they should have an opportunity to play. Especially when they're developing and they're trying out things. You should be able to try things and not spend $2,000 to do it.
The thing that excites me the most about this is being able to offer a variety of things and expanding what we do offer, which is really just a little piece of it. And it has always just fallen onto the district to run everything. But given that potential to be real community and to be able to branch out to, I mean, I've seen it from the senior side and from the senior story. And so it's always amazed me that we don't support ours, that it's fallen on the district, which I think is great that the district has stepped up, but that the community sort of falling short of that is sort of this weird thing. But I love that the schools have always supported the seniors and vice versa. Definitely love not having to have somebody get to play, do that. Great. And the opportunities that would be afforded to our students. And again, just to the community, why sounds really great. Like, maybe that field house is in high school.
We don't want to own those. Their pools are really.
I was gonna say, I'm really pushing for a bigger pool.
18 to 20 million. 12 years plus support costs. I mean, the pools probably cost us $250,000 a year.
Well, if you go into Grand Rapids, their pools. I have a couple questions on, well, first of all, I love the idea of having the campus being more active and having, more opportunities across the board. I know that there are probably, well, I don't know. I know that there are at least a handful of parents or older people that aren't in K through 12, who would play tennis and who would play with the directly. Tennis is big in this area, so you know, the fact that you can walk out on the court versus having to participate and be there, it's just like, you know, why do you go to the wellness center when you can run around right? So it's kind of simple. But I do have a couple questions in terms of and I don't take this as I don't want to support seniors, I do. But I'm just wondering whether the other rec villages in the area support funding for the senior centers in their communities. And then I'm interested, it sounds like there was a survey done for the seniors, and just wondering, you know, do you have an indication of what percentage of the population will use the facility and how that compares to other areas?
So I do know the Celine Cares Village, which is a recreation authority that funds the Celine Senior Center. Whitmore Lake, they don't, it's a smaller district, so they don't want a ton of funds. I don't know if they fund seniors or not. I know they do use it to support their education program. And then Chelsea does not have a recreation village. So I don't know how they fund the seniors, but it's significant. Chelsea is.
They've got some, at least quasi-public funding, quasi-private funding sources.
Survey, I don't have the exact data from those surveys. I could probably get a hold of the community fund one from before the pandemic. I remember being in all those groups, and in the end, it was the top thing that came up was funding for seniors, and it was community center. I still remember seeing it on the wall. They circled on after they went through all the process. And then we have data that I still have to finalize into a sheet form right now. It's some Excel sheets.
I guess I just want to know that the need is there and that we're filling a need that is there first.
The senior need.
It's certainly a perceived need, because I think the survey you're talking about people support, not usage.
Yeah. But there
so
is
we have good numbers that you can analyze on the support, and it's the senior center was the #1 item, I think, and they all had very strong support, similar to what we've had on mining issues in the district. So there's a real strong perception in the community that this is all something that would be great benefit to the community. And the rec village does require that it be open to everyone. So it doesn't have a seniors tag on it or a youth tag. It's everybody, and then you figure out how to balance the different expenditures to serve all the different groups that might be able to.
So that's the key that I didn't hear in that presentation. That it's mandatory that it applies to everybody. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, we tried to summarize it with kids and adults. We should use everyone. So with the seniors, the real challenge is there is no other entity in this community that could collect enough funds to operate a senior center and to operate senior activities at the rate a rate that would allow enough funding to operate a robust seniors activities. You can do it around a municipality, so the township could do it, the city could do it, but only as their own or combined with one or more. We hit 84 square miles.
We're FGL partial township, so it doesn't really lend itself to working with other groups.
That's why it's really unique. That's why you don't see it in every community, but there are some places that kind of make sense. And the way our setup is, we run community ed, we gave space to the seniors for years. We have all of the activities that youth are engaged in are in our facilities at some point in this community. Whether they're run by an outside organization or they're run by community ed, they're in somewhere. And when we look, like with kids, you look at how much they have a kid play youth soccer is not cheap. They might not even know if they like soccer. You look at the travel world, sports. There is a point that I think when the pandemic hit and everybody was locked in their house, they started to rethink things. And you're seeing one of the things that was rethought is, why am I playing all these sports and driving all over the place and paying $10,000 a year for this why don't I focus on a couple things, which is both good and bad. And then what we saw last year when we opened up opportunities for kids to just do two of anything they wanted, kids that had never done anything, never done that activity before because it was free, they were there and they tried it. And they're like, I didn't like that. But they had a chance. And as a school district, it's ideal if we can create, if we have a mechanism to do it and the community supported it, then we can give kids chances to try things. We can give adults chances to try things. I talked to a community member the other day, who's a parent of the district, just in general, to kind of pick the person's brain a little bit. And the person went, oh yeah, I used to go to yoga with the seniors because I really liked it. Or I go to community ed yoga, or I play in the men's basketball league. It's great. So, but we are limited to what we can offer because really at fee-based, you can only offer so much and run so much. So this would allow us to expand and have margin for error.
That reminds me of something that when I was really pushing for when my kids were fifth, sixth grade is to have organized sports, track and cross country. Right now, they're not. Some districts, sixth grade at least, can compete at the middle school level. I think it's really important, especially for girls, to get involved early with organized sports and team sports, because once they get 7th and 8th grade, they're kind of self-conscious and they're not as willing to risk, failing. So they need to risk failing. And I think sports are really.
This has a little bit of flavor of when we did the community pool pilot. That was not something that was driven so much by the schools as a response to a request from the community. And based on surveys and all, I think primarily we're responding to something that the community has already expressed the desire and need for. Because it isn't a school program, it's for the community.
And we've been really purposeful historically on creating spaces for community activities. So if you look at how we schedule the pool, we make sure that we have, when we do lifeguards, we have morning open swim. We charge like $3. It's enough to almost cover a lifeguard, or $1. Sorry, we charge $1. So if we get enough people there, we can almost cover the lifeguard for that period of time. Yeah, we know. But anyways, we opened up for community swim. We built, when we did the quad fields, they're great for our high school softball program. But when you look at it, we only have a varsity team, which has varsity field. We have a JV team. Some years we might have a freshman team. We just started a middle school team. But we have a ton of softball fields because you look and it's a youth community, little league, baseball and softball is out there all the time. Travel leagues out there all the time. You look at the turfs and at the high school, and even back here, you got lacrosse is out here almost every night behind Mill Creek or at the little clearing at the bottom of the big sledding hill or Wiley Sledding Hill. At the turfs Sunday, there were kids everywhere on the turfs. You go out there in the fall and there's soccer going on everywhere. Someone's always in our facilities with our kids, and we're always juggling around how to access it. We try to keep it as cheap as we can, working with the outside groups. It could be expanded if we had mechanisms to do that, expand the kids that want to try things.
We've got more space, and certainly if we had lights, it would expand the usage greatly. That's certainly one of the good things that we did with the twin turf fields to put that there. And the twin turf has really lent itself every place, twin turf and football field, to expanded opportunities. But it used to be we couldn't even let the band be out practicing on the field where it was a patch of mud. Just continue to expand and do as much as we can, but the desire is there to meet community needs.
I just wanted to say that I really think this village would have a lot of appeal for community. I think it does a really good job hitting all of the different groups who have an investment in the happenings of the school district. I think that in particular, Jennifer, your question about the seniors, I think it really just continues to expand the definition of education in our community. And I know, when Jenkins opened, we focused a lot on, education starting at 6 weeks. And I really think this even just broadens our definition as a whole community. community into thinking about what do adults need and what do seniors need. In the same way, they're very limited by their budget right now. And so having a greater budget would allow them to offer increased programming. And, you know, my hope would be not just for the seniors themselves, but for the adults who support the seniors and for kids who are, you know, grandchildren. I think it really offers a lot of opportunity. And I do think this is something our community would really support and get behind. So I am glad that we're talking about it. And I do think that looking at it, you know, sooner rather than later so that the impact can be felt would be great. Especially, again, coming out of the pandemic, looking at what services are needed right now for our community and thinking about how to best give them to them. I think this is a really big thing.
Large degree, it's quality of life for the community. Our community has grown and has higher expectations than we had 40 years ago.
When you look at how we've historically operated, so prior to the 2017 bond, the Dexter Community Band and Orchestra, we set up their opportunities to perform in the CPA, working around when we have other concert schedules, we have show up, and then they have like their one weekend that they can get in there for a performance. But then we give them space to be able to practice in our band or orchestra rooms. But we started to run into problems because our drama club grew to about 150 kids. And the location at the high school with the orchestra rooms and drama is it was just a ton of kids, all with 150 kids can't rehearse on one stage. So we had to have spillover space. But then we had cheerleading, needed to use the commons of the cafeteria area. So we were running into space issues. So when we purposefully, when we did the bond work at Mill Creek for the new band room and renovated the old band room into an orchestra room, we purposely placed the band room near our parking lot so that with an external doors, the community band could get to the Mill Creek room, and we built it the same dimensions as the high school room so that we could handle that spillover for a community group. And then we did the same thing with orchestra. We made sure that in our thought process it had access from the outside so that we weren't tied up with that pinch of how we were trying to run our high school programs and access for community groups. This building, part of our plan when we moved the students from this building over to Beacon was to create space for community ed program. It gives us a chance to put our robotics, not the high school robotics team, but the middle school and the elementary robotics team. We give them a space to set up, because robotics isn't something you can put together and take apart and pack up in a box. You can't do that in a school that has kids in it, in that classroom all day, and then pack and unpack. And we run robotics that you saw today through community ed. We scrounge for every grant we get. And then we have some fees that we have to charge to make it work. We scrounge for every grant we can from everywhere. And we end up getting a few $1,000s in grants, and that covers parts of it. It usually covers registration fees and some of the materials, but then we're always looking for donations, just making sure we can get materials. So we've historically always looked out for how to get community groups access to our facilities. This would help us formalize it and actually do it at scale. Instead of we just happen to hit a window where we can make this happen. It really would be sustainable for decades.
Do you guys have anything?
I think it sounds great. I know the one Slane seems to be in their community, so we could see some cool career.
Yeah, anything I was gonna ask has already been asked. I think I just want to know, has Dexter ever done anything like this before? Or is this kind of the first time we've even attempted it?
We actually did put something together when Rick Miller was first authorized by the state. And we put some interest from a bunch of groups together, things that might help them. It was in the beginning stages and it did not pass. Would have been a leader back then, now you follow.
That sounds all.
So collectively, had for discussion at the next meeting. You think? You don't have to vote. I'm just looking for discussion. I think discussions and details of timelines and things that would have to happen.
Yeah.
There's gonna be more questions. as we-
Yeah, you also had to process.
Yeah, we're talking to more community members about it and their feedback as well. What's the date of the we need to get it on the ballot if we want to make the August?
The March,
Hey,
May 9th, sorry, May 9th.
We've had back meetings about.
Yeah, we'll, tonight, another discussion and then the final vote.
On May 2nd.
That'll need, that's something that's, will be reviewed by school attorney to make sure that, everything's exactly the way it needs to be. Permissions and restrictions.
We can always do a special if we needed to for some reason.
No, not much difference between the meeting in May and then.
Go on. The second of the night. So we'll return for discussion.
Yeah, because we should talk more details. You've had time, it's the first time you got a chance to talk, and you're gonna have thoughts. I mean, I put in, like here, I just put examples. You're gonna have time to think. I thought they're.
Good start. Okay. We'll move on to our second opportunity for public comment. Just to remind everyone that public comments should pertain to Dexter Community School District matters and concerns related to operation of the schools or to matters within the authority of the board. Please announce yourself and your district of residence and indicate if you represent any organization. And this time it's 3 minutes allotted to each speaker. And please understand that we cannot respond, but we will listen. Is there anyone? Even though I just said your name, please say your name again.
Kevin Creech, daughter is a senior. I love the discussion. I love the leadership of the board. I think it's great. You guys are very engaged. It's great to see. So we talked about before, I go back to the beginning of the year, student outcomes. We need to have this type of discussion on student outcomes. I got the MSTEP scores right in front of me, grades 3 through 8 for Dexter. 2018-19 compared to 2020-2021. Our math scores are down 15 to 20%. Our English ranges from even to now 10%. So we like to blame COVID. So I'm going to pull up another district, Northwest Brighton, 3 through 8. Their math scores are down up to 8%, plus 2 in some cases. English, down 7 to plus 2. So some districts have figured it out. We need to figure it out. Our kids are behind. We all know it. Brighton has figured it out. We need to do the same. We don't talk about it. I want the same leadership and passion talking about student outcomes in their education. Are we doing it outside this meeting? If we're not, we're missing the boat. Let's have a principal here and talk about a program they're running that's working so we can maybe look across and see if we can do it in other schools. I just feel like we're missing the boat here. We owe it to our kids. So that's all I got. Thanks.
No one else coming up to the podium. To board comments. EFD meets tomorrow. They will be approving their spring meal. $6,000 worth of grants to look at tomorrow. I will check with the results of that.
Very successful auction.
They had a very successful auction, yes. Yeah, very cool. And I agree with Brooklyn's thoughts and other. Next thing on the agenda is the information
items, which include our board bulletin from March 21st. If nothing else, we need to move into closed session for the superintendent's quarterly evaluation.
Board of Education will have a closed session for purposes of discussing the superintendent's quarterly evaluation. Following items. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all those in favor of moving into closed session for the purpose of discussing the superintendent's quarterly evaluation, following 5-minute break, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Okay. Adjourn for 5 minutes.